Okay, aloha guys, welcome back. I saw this video, so I wanted to cover it. 3 paths Democrats could take for a 2028 comeback. Let's see what they're talking about.
Democrats might actually be positioned for a historic landslide win next time. They also might spend decades in the national minority. If those sound like wildly different options for the future, you're right, because that's how politics works. And right now, it cannot be overstated just how much the rules of politics have been rewritten.
This will truly be the golden age of America.
Donald Trump's 2024 victory shattered fundamental assumptions that people who work in, follow, and cover politics have held for decades. The assumption that Democrats had a lock on the popular vote. Nope.
I never assumed that.
The Democrats win working class voters. Nope.
Well, they pushed them away.
Democrats can rely on solid support from people of color.
And see, that's crazy too, because the Democrats since the 90s at least have been just screwing over people of color. There's no reason that people of color should be voting for the Democrats. Or the working class. You got NAFTA and worse since.
White voters would keep getting more conservative. That Republicans can't be competitive in deep blue states. That the way for Republicans to expand their base was to moderate on immigration and culture. That higher
See, everything they thought it wasn't. It's time for the Green Party, man. Just come on over.
Turnout benefits Democrats. And of course, the assumption that being a convicted felon who helped inspire a violent attack to stop the peaceful transition of power was self-evidently disqualifying for voters.
They play on that too much. They talk about how Trump might go against his political enemies, this and that. Well, his political enemies went against their political enemies and him, right? It's the same thing. He's like the first the first president that I know of that's like been convicted of something, but they're so stupid. Like, they convicted him of financial crimes, not even the real crimes that he would have committed. Like,
obviously not. Of course, none of these just showed up in November. If you look back at our videos on this channel, you'll see us talking about a lot of these months and months ago. A ton of these things were clear to anyone who was really paying attention, but the sheer weight of all of them coming crashing down in one night, in the span of like an hour, was enormous. And it's not an exaggeration to say that it has leveled the political and media systems that have existed for at least 2 decades. But history didn't start in 2004, or 2008, or 2016. Even as this is a unique moment, which has resulted in a very unique figure.
It's not that unique. He's not much different than Ronald Reagan.
Being elevated to the presidency, it's not unique for a party to lose an election. It's not unique to lose the popular vote. It's not unique to have a crushing defeat. Parties have gone through this before. How, whether, and when they come back requires choices, sometimes hard ones, but it is possible. And there are 3 relatively recent elections and models.
It's only possible if the Green Party doesn't do their job, or if the people, every party is a people-powered party. Like, for some reason, people want to go to the Democrats and Republicans just because they think the duopoly is all they can do. The Green Party needs you as people, as citizens of the United States, to join the Green Party and help build it. You just call the local Green Party, get online, fill out the form, join the Green Party, say you want to run if you want to run. But if all we do is sit back and watch the Democrats and Republicans, they'll just keep their control over us.
To look to for clues as to how that comeback might happen. First comeback example, 1992, the Democratic rebrand. After 8 years of Ronald Reagan, Democrats were eager to win the White House back in 1988. And they had real reason to think that they could. There was economic dissatisfaction, scandals like Iran-Contra, general boredom with the party in power. And for months, Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis led Vice President George H.W. Bush in polls. Then the fall campaign kicked in. Republicans had a really successful convention, Bush nailed his debates with Dukakis, and ran an overall aggressive campaign, including the important ad.
He allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton.
Bush ended up beating Dukakis in a landslide, with 40 states and 400 electoral votes. A bigger win than any we have seen in the years since. And it wasn't just the loss itself or the breadth of it. It was that, with Bush's win, Republicans had now won 5 of the past 6 presidential elections. That's 20 out of 25 years of a Republican in the White House. So even as Democrats gained in...
And they still didn't do nothing good for nobody. Like, we've had Democrats and Republicans, and the last time anybody did anything good was FDR. And then it took till Nixon to mess that up. But since Nixon, no president has done anything for any people, really.
in Congress the same night, the election hit them really hard, and many of them decided they needed a change, specifically to rebrand as younger and more moderate. A number of Democrats emerged with what they called a third way, a different political philosophy than the existing two choices of supply-side conservatism or New Deal liberalism. The most prominent of them was the then not super known, not super heavyweight governor of a small southern state by the name of Bill Clinton. Clinton became a
New
leader
Deal
of this
liberalism, huh? That's terrible.
The name of Bill Clinton. Clinton became a leader of this cohort of younger Democrats who made an effort to break both on policy and image from older Democrats. And, as we all know, the rebrand worked. Clinton beat Bush in 1992, gave Democrats full control of DC for the first time in a long time, was reelected in 1996, and left the presidency.
Full control of DC, and did he pass universal health care, raise the minimum wage? He passed the crime bill.
Presidency uber popular, even after a bunch of scandals. And if you're under a certain age, it might be hard to understand.
And he had some scandals. That's
why so many Democrats, especially older Democrats, still love Bill Clinton. But when you look at the history, you kind of get it. The Democratic Party was deep in the wilderness, and he came along and offered a new approach that gave them a path out. That approach, rebrand with someone younger,
younger and more moderate. How does that even make sense? Should have opened the New Deal to more people. The New Deal still left out a lot of people. It did a lot of good, but it left out a lot of people. They should have opened it to everybody. It solidified the New Deal and the American dream rather than moving to the right, being more moderate. And then you see what we have now. We go from Bill Clinton to Barack Obama to Joe Biden. Yay.
Moderate and from outside DC continues to be the go-to rebrand model for political parties, and it's available for Democrats now. The second comeback path, 2008, wait them out.
If you or a family member...
So he said 2028, what's that going to be? Barack Obama, the most disappointing president of all time, Mr. Hope and Change, does nothing?
Again, if you're under a certain age, it's hard to really understand just how devastated Democrats were after the 2004 election. Think about it from their perspective. They had had 8 years of Clinton, who they loved, narrowly lost in 2000 because of what felt like a dubious fluke, including the first popular vote electoral college split in 110 years, resulting in someone they kind of considered a Nepo baby joke becoming president. Then two major wars, Afghanistan and Iraq, started, and Iraq especially got deeply unpopular as 2003 and 2004 went on. And by the time the fall campaign came along, George Bush, who had had a 90% approval rating after 9/11, was actually trailing John Kerry in a lot of polls. And on election day, Kerry led in the exit polls, and most people on both sides expected him to win. There's even a famous story that Bush advisor Condoleezza Rice cried on Air Force One as the exits came in. That's how down bad Republicans were. And then
George W. Bush has been reelected.
Bush won, sweeping middle America and making deeper gains, especially in rural areas, even as Kerry did really well in cities. And that coalition came in part because Bush's campaign mobilized a lot of voters who Democrats, and exit pollsters for that matter, had completely missed. Religious conservatives motivated by faith, culture, and banning same-sex marriage, which Bush had proposed earlier that year. And again, think about the sum total of that. A Texas Republican, who Democrats considered obviously dumb and incompetent, had beaten a Massachusetts Democrat by mobilizing many people Democrats didn't even know how to reach around an idea of America they didn't even recognize. Once again, Democrats were forced to take a deep look inward, and their conclusion was basically that they had become too much the party of urban liberalism and needed to expand their brand and representation. At the Democratic National Committee, this became known as the 50-state strategy, an effort to contest and fund races.
So back then they did the 50-state strategy. That's what I'm talking about now. But I mean, they obviously gave it up. They ran a 7-state strategy with Kamala Harris. So.
All over the country. Part of that goal was just practical. Of course, you want to make sure that every state party can pay for ads and office space. But part of it was also about the message that that effort sent. Even if they didn't win all those races, giving off the vibe of Democrats care enough about rural Ohio or Oklahoma to try to win there was a good political bet. And in 2006 and 2008, it paid off. Democrats won back control of Congress and the presidency, in part by winning over people in the kinds of small towns and rural communities that had rejected them in 2004. But all in all, Democrats didn't really change their policies after 2004. Arguably more important than what they did was what Republicans had done. Their main agenda item in 2005 was an attempt to privatize Social Security, which was an incredibly unpopular disaster and failed. Bush himself was blamed for a response to Hurricane Katrina that embodied all of the criticisms of him: aloof, incompetent, and indifferent to American struggles. There were multiple high-profile ethics scandals in the White House and Republican Congress. And most of all, the Bush administration doubled down on the Iraq War. Democrats positioned themselves well to take advantage of those things, recruiting candidates like war hero Jim Webb in military-heavy Virginia, anti-abortion veteran Chris Carney in a heavily Catholic part of Pennsylvania, or a small-town school teacher named Tim Walz in rural Minnesota. And in 2008, obviously, there was a guy named Barack Obama. But the reason they had something to take advantage of really had nothing to do with them. It was the mistakes of the GOP majority. And that approach...
There you go. It's the same thing right now. It's the mistakes of the Democratic Party. We have now's the time we can take advantage of those mistakes.
Get out of the way and hope, wait, and pray for their opponents to mess up is very available to Democrats. Third comeback path, 2016, the Republican double down. Not to sound like a broken record, but if you weren't old enough to follow politics in 2012, and especially if you don't know a lot of conservatives, it's really hard to grasp just how much Barack Obama's re-election devastated Republicans.
You need muscle if you want to.
Well, you need muscle no matter what age you are, so you know.
Think about it. In 2008, Obama had been swept into power with a coalition many people predicted could put Republicans in the minority for decades. They were adrift, unpopular, and
And that's true. So the thing is, the Democrats, Obama, the Black Panther Party, well, the Black Panther Party wasn't Democrats, but Obama, you got Bernie, they started movements, but they didn't finish them. They didn't keep them going. That's the difference in the Green Party and the Democrats. If we have a Bernie Sanders or a Barack Obama in the Green Party and we do a movement like either one of those, and we have that many people filling out stadiums and coming and registering for the Green Party, and then like they got the squad to run, we can get people like the squad and more to run, we will keep our movement going. In between, right after whatever election we start, the next day, we will still hold rallies and keep the movement going so that we can keep it up for the next election and the next election and next election. We only need 2-3 elections, and I'm talking about 2-year elections. So this midterm, the presidential election, next midterm, I would think by the second midterm or the second presidential election, we'd be good. If we start a movement like Bernie Sanders had, but we just, the hard part is maintaining it. We need some charismatic people to get out here, start talking, fill these stadiums up, do something, but once we get the movement, we got to maintain the movement.
Leaderless. Then they got a lifeline. As the economy and his agenda struggled, Obama's popularity cratered. And in 2010, Republicans won a huge victory that no one expected even a year earlier, picking up 64 House seats, the most in one election since 1938. Obama continued to struggle throughout 2011 and 2012, and Romney even led in many polls way late in the campaign. And Republicans were really confident. A ton of the biggest voices on the right unskewed polls that they felt were unfair. Watchers of Fox News were regularly hearing stuff like this.
Romney's going to carry 325 electoral votes.
Of course, Obama won. And the night of the election, after Ohio was called for him, basically guaranteeing his re-election, Republican strategist Karl Rove, generally considered a pretty level-headed, sober-minded person, famously was just in denial live on air.
Even if they have made it on the basis of select precincts, I'd be very cautious about intruding into this process.
Well, folks.
And while that was maybe the most extreme example, that was really kind of where a lot of Republicans were. Just this deep feeling of, how on earth did this happen? And both officially and unofficially, Republicans came to an agreement. Their economic positions, free trade, cutting spending, reforming and cutting entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare, those were fine. But they had been too harsh on immigration and cultural issues, and they needed to moderate there.
I think Republicans have done a pathetic job of reaching out to people of color.
Everyone from Sean Hannity to the Republican National Committee chairman agreed on
Way
it.
different.
The RNC even released a big,
It's a way different tone than we have right now, huh?
long report called the Growth and Opportunity Project that officially recommended this. And over the next few years, they got some validation of that. Younger, fresher Republicans like Carlos Curbelo or Elise Stefanik, People who supported that traditional GOP position on the economy, but also backed the new, more moderate approach on stuff like immigration, helped them make big gains in 2014. Paul Ryan became the Speaker of the House and the de facto leader of the party's new consensus: libertarian economic policy, pro-free trade, pro-immigration, and explicitly reaching out to non-white voters. By the time the 2016 GOP primary started,
they were into diversity at one time. Could you believe it?
Seemed indisputable to many people that this was the way Republicans needed to move if they wanted to win. Then, in June 2015, along came someone named Donald Trump, who represented literally the complete opposite of that post-2012 takeaway. His approach? Instead of moderating on immigration, double down on it, get even more conservative.
I will build a great wall.
Instead of continuing to embrace free trade and free markets, break with them. Go back to an old school approach that both parties had abandoned. Instead of doubling down on spending cuts and entitlement cuts, moderate on those. Promise not to touch Social Security and Medicare. And it worked.
I think it's a great idea.
Giving something.
He won and gave his party full control of DC. He revealed that most Republicans and a whole bunch of non-Republicans didn't actually want what their party leaders and many media elites decided Republicans needed to offer after 2012. And as we know now, he ultimately succeeded in remaking the GOP into a more populist, more multiracial party. All by not just not following the experts, but by doing the exact opposite of what they had offered. That option too is available for Democrats. Screw the experts, screw the post-election consensus,
and screw the Democrats.
Take a leap of faith, hold hands, and jump. As recent years have proved, it might work. Now, obviously, there's a lot of nuance here. Bill Clinton's victory and reinvention of the Democratic Party was partially luck. A whole bunch of heavyweight Democratic candidates had decided not to run that year because of Bush's initial popularity. And the brief recession in 1992 came at the worst possible time for Bush. Obama benefited from a historically unpopular Republican incumbent, a once-in-a-century recession, and some electoral movement that had already shown up in 2004.
Two Bush recessions?
Republican support in the suburbs. Trump got really lucky in his first victory, running against the most unpopular Democratic nominee since polling began, benefiting from a late-breaking revival of her email scandal, courtesy of the FBI director, and getting overperforming third-party candidates who allowed him to win with a minority of them.
Look at the propaganda talking about third-party candidates. They wouldn't vote for you anyway. And, well, especially Hillary Clinton. They say Gary Johnson here took more votes, pulled more votes from Donald Trump than Jill Stein pulled from Hillary Clinton. If you vote green, you're not voting for the Democrats whatsoever. The Democrats have nothing for you if you're a progressive or a left-winger. If you're a libertarian, you got the Tea Party, and the Republicans are a little bit closer to libertarians, a lot closer to libertarians than Democrats are to progressives. So a lot of libertarians might vote for Republicans, but if the libertarians have a good candidate, which Gary Johnson was a pretty good candidate until Aleppo, but had he knew where Aleppo was or what Aleppo was, he might have got some more votes, but alas, Aleppo. Anyway, they pull more from the Republicans, so all four parties that we would talk about, Libertarian, Green, Republican, and Democrat, Hillary Clinton got helped out from the third parties.
The vote. There's no guarantee what amount of luck or freak incidents will come in the next few years, or which way they'll swing. But history happens at the intersection of luck and work. And if there's one thing we know from the past few decades, it's that life goes on, elections go on, and no party has a permanent lock on things. The paths for a comeback are available for the Democratic Party. Which way will the next few years go?
Let's block that path, Green Party. Put the work in. We take over. Don't talk about it, be about it. So let's do this from across the spectrum. We out.